Congratulations on this. It is such an impactful film. How difficult is it to tell a story that has such, I don't know how to put it, such great emotional aspects to it?
Wow. It's difficult. But it's also really rewarding. And it's interesting because people ask, like, how difficult was it to talk to like relatives, descendants of victims? And they are actually like almost happy, I would say, to talk about their story because they realize the importance of that them being the person to tell the story, but also somebody who is willing to listen. In the words of our subject, Susan Knittel, who's a memory studies scholar. And so this film is really, I think it's like a first of its kind film. Well, we definitely know it's the first feature film that to solely focus on Action T4 and to be told by disabled people. So we know that. And then I think it's also a new kind of film in a way because it is an interacting with memorials themselves. And so it's like this genre, it's this new genre of like you can go up to a memorial and film yourself in it and create a scene really and to kind of bring that history into the present tense. It's a very contemporary film, unlike Landsman's Shoah, where he had survivors but none of the surviving spaces. We have no survivors because Action T4, the Nazi Action T4 program, was incredibly effective at eradicating disabled people. We have no survivors. If you showed up at a gas chamber, you were murdered. So there was no survivors. But we have all the spaces because they didn't think to destroy the actual gas chambers and places where people were killed because they saw this as disinfection. These murders were not even murders, they were disinfection. And you even saw them testify like this at the Nuremberg trials. You saw nurses refer to disabled people as husks of humanity. And I think this film, it just reminds you, it shakes you from that and says, if you've ever thought or knew of a disabled person, think of them now and think of how decades and decades later, this is just surfacing.
Mhm.
The disabled people were the first victims of the Nazis, the first to be killed, and the last to be redeemed, the last to be remembered. The memorial to Action T4 was open to the public in Berlin, Germany in 2014. So that's a lot of time passing before anyone notices.
Definitely. And going with that, you're right. Visiting these landmarks is very impactful in the film. For you taking this journey with and hearing all these stories, how are you feeling during the process of filming this?
Honestly, I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling inspired. This project, it's not my calling. It called to me. Like and it kept calling to me. My parents first brought me to the gas chamber in Bernburg, Germany when I was 9 years old, and I drew a graphic novel about it, inspired by Art Spiegelman's Mouse. I put us as little mouse characters because I didn't see disabled people represented in the Holocaust. And I think that's why I fell into filmmaking because I saw things that weren't being represented, and then the power of speaking about like an identity
Mhm.
of like having a disability and how it creates space in a room for something. And then you add to that the power of film, the power of a film to hold space for someone or an entire group of people and to kind of generate further screenings in communities every time you show it. It was just kind of like a natural thing that like flowed out of me. It was, I don't know, it was like almost like osmosis.
Wow, that's interesting to hear. for you being able to give these people a voice and a platform that they can express themselves and they can inform people, how important was it for you to be able to humanize them the way that you did and make sure that people understood what they went through as well as, how this is affecting us in present day?
It's such a great question. This was honestly one of the most challenging subjects to make a film about because many of the lives of the victims were almost at some points reduced to entirely medical charts. Like there's nothing. They lived their lives in an institution, and nurses recorded their temperatures and their body weights. And you go into a subject like that and you're like, how do I find the humanity
Mhm,
when almost nothing has been left behind? And I think the answer is through disabled people now. Any disabled person that walks into that space, it kind of almost hits you immediately. You're like, wow, that could have been me. Like the Nazis, they knew how to find disabled people. They sent questionnaires to doctors, and then the doctors would tell them people's medical histories, whether they went to school, whether they worked or not. And so you start to realize that the perpetrators, whether or not you have any agency or ownership over your own identity as a disabled person, the perpetrators didn't care. They would just find you.
mhm,
And there's something about that really strikes me. And it kind of like wakes you up, right? Like it's like I can't sleep anymore, knowing this. And we're seeing, we say history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And we're seeing similar patterns right now reverberating into our contemporary spaces. And how can you remember something that you've never forgotten, right? So this film, I think, is for better or for worse, this is this film's perfect moment to surface and arise to create and spread awareness of this when we need it most, when we need to understand that disabled people are targeted and that they're some of the people that are on the front lines in the first waves to be affected by bureaucratic policies.
definitely. And I think n- n- in this time and age right now, and the way the politics are, the term Nazi just gets thrown around and kind of loses its impact. And I think this film brings us back to the notion of what a Nazi was. Why was it important for you to make sure that we understood the horrific nature of Nazis?
Well, because quite simply, you couldn't tell the story without doing that. And I think as filmmakers choose subjects and topics which we would never think about, right? The director of The Brutalist recently just said this in his Golden Globes speech that we have to trust filmmakers because they see the validity and the worth in a topic that might seem completely bygone and kind of already gone over and thoroughly explored. And why would we ever think about why or how the Nazis arrived at a gas chamber, right? Why would that thought even cross our minds? Because we think we know everything already about the Holocaust. We went through it in school. We were taught about it in textbooks. We've been there. It's like a movie that is a tough movie that we saw. You see it once and you're like, I don't need to see that again,
Mhm,
right? Like 12 Years a Slave or something, like I'm Not Your Negro, like a film that you see and then you're like, that was so powerful. I almost want it to be so special that that's going to be the time that I see it and think about it. But no, it actually turns out you have to go back because we miss things. We miss things as humans. We miss things as historians and professionals. Our biases, our perspectives, they kind of override certain stories. And so I think anything at this moment, film has a chance right now to purvey those perspectives and to convey them in ways that AI or any other technology can't right now, especially for the lives of the dead. There's an old Jewish proverb that states, "You die twice, once when you pass, and once when your name's forgotten."
Well, yeah. For you as a filmmaker, was there any you seem like you have such a passion for this film and that you really put everything into it, but was there ever any obstacles or any rough moments there where it just made you sit back and think and reflect on everything that you're putting into this film?
Not yet. I kind of like getting through this has been a marathon. And they really mean it when they say that you have to love your subject of your film. You have to love the topic because it will test you time and again. Um, and it it kept pushing me through and calling to me, and I'm kind of just like a conduit, like almost for it at this point, because it's my job to just receive the stories of this history, and then to think about ways to convey them, and how do we reach into the past and bring it into the present. I think this is an ongoing process. It's like a never-ending story in some ways.
As a conduit and as an advocate for this film, how does it feel having it come to, such a huge film festival?
Slamdance was our in our top tier because Slamdance gets it. The Unstoppable program, it has disabled people in the programming team, and 1 in 4 people in the United States is disabled. 70 million people of our 334 plus million population, and we don't see representation on that level in media and in film festivals. And what people don't realize is this affects what stories are chosen, right? Because programmers tend to fight for things. And I can say this as someone who's been on both sides, because this is another beauty of slam dances. You can only program for the fest once you've had something programmed as a filmmaker. So I went from first time filmmaker with a narrative short, to Slamdance programmer and juror, and I got to see how people die on hills for films. Like, it really comes down to that. In the debate room, you're dying on a hill for a certain film that you think is incredibly important. And what Hollywood tells us is that there are certain films that no matter who you are, they rise above the occasion or whatever, right? I actually don't think this is true. It's a narrative that we like to say because Hollywood likes to silo things. They like to make certain things monolithic and representative of everyone. And what you realize when you program a film festival like Slamdance is there's so many worthy stories, so many beautiful different perspectives, and we are just scratching the surface, like the tip of the surface of the iceberg of what film has to offer. So I hope that more film festivals follow in Slamdance's footsteps, and have more inclusive and representational programmers, so that they can find these films and more of these films. So we're not just iconicizing 5 films in a given year.
Definitely. Well, congratulations on this film. I thought it was a fantastic watch, and I do hope that it brings about a larger conversation when people watch it. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Your questions I can tell that the film really spoke to you. And so I thank you for engaging so deeply with the film.